A spoiled millionaire shoves his bound, panicked thoroughbred into shark-infested waters, watching coldly as great whites circle, drawn by its desperate thrashing. Just as the predators strike, an unthinkable twist changes everything. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and follow for more powerful stories that will stay with you. Now, let's begin. The morning sun streamed through the massive windows of the Rufus estate, casting shimmering patterns across the polished floors, an elegant display of light that Harry barely noticed. Slouched in his Italian leather armchair, the 21-year-old gazed out at the sprawling gardens, his eyes vacant, fingers idly swirling the crystal glass in his hand. The expensive liquor, like everything else surrounding him, brought no real satisfaction. "Mr. Harry," called Lily, the housekeeper who had cared for him since childhood, "your parents are on the line." Her voice carried that familiar blend of warmth and worry, one only nurtured through years of devotion. "Son, we just called to let you know we won't be able to make it home for your birthday next week." Marina's voice, cool and metallic, crackled through the receiver. "An incredible business opportunity came up in Asia, and, Harry, you know we're doing this for your future." Francisco's deep voice interrupted, firm and resolute. "We transferred more money into your account. Celebrate however you want." "They think they can buy everything with money," Harry muttered under his breath, pushing himself abruptly to his feet. "Lily, get the car ready. I'm going out." "Harry, my friend." Richard's voice rang out the moment he stepped into the club, raising a glass of champagne. "Thought you weren't coming. You missed the qualifying race for my new thoroughbred. First place, of course." Harry followed the group toward the stables where the most prized horses were kept. And that's when he saw him, Storm. A magnificent black thoroughbred, his sleek coat gleamed under the stable lights, a single white mark on his chest setting him apart. The horse stood with an air of quiet majesty, his dark eyes glimmering with an intelligence that few might notice. As Harry signed the papers for what would become his most extravagant purchase yet, he could already picture the headlines. "Heir to the Rufus, Fortune acquires nation's most valuable horse." For once, he would be the center of attention. What he failed to see as he posed for photos beside his new acquisition was the way Storm watched him in return. The horse, accustomed to handlers who treated him with patience and care, regarded his new owner with a mix of curiosity and unease. Instinct warned him. This young man did not see him as a living creature, but as a trophy. "Get him ready for a race next month," Harry ordered the trainer without so much as a glance at Storm. "I want all eyes on me when he wins his first competition under my name." That night, while Storm adjusted to his new stable, Harry celebrated with his friends, already envisioning his rise to the pinnacle of high society. What he didn't know was that his relentless hunger for recognition was about to set him on a path far different from the one he had imagined. One that would not only reshape his own life, but alter the course of everyone around him. From across the room, Lily watched her young master with quiet concern. She had seen that look in his eyes before, the same determined gleam that had always preceded his greatest recklessness. And something in her heart told her that this time, the consequences would be far graver than any whim of the past. The weeks following Storm's purchase settled into a routine the horse had never known before. Once accustomed to meticulous care and specialized training under his previous owners, he now faced a different kind of neglect, one that masqueraded as attention. Liam, the oldest trainer at O'Hara Stables, watched Harry's reckless decisions with growing concern. "Sir, Storm needs time to adjust before you push him into intense training," he would argue whenever he had the chance. "I don't care," Harry would reply, barely looking up from his phone. The race is in 3 weeks, and he needs to be at his peak. And double his training schedule. Liam let out a quiet sigh, his fingers brushing against the horse's broad chest. Storm responded with a low whinny, almost a plea. I know it's tough, buddy, I know. Liam, my friend, Harry's voice rang out, slurred with drink as he beckoned him over. Come, sit with me. I was just telling the guys how Storm is going to dominate the track next weekend. But when Liam hesitated, Harry's smile vanished in an instant. Don't give me excuses. I paid a fortune for that horse. He damn well better be ready. Laughter erupted around them, echoing through the upscale club. But Liam only tightened his grip on the brim of his cap. Mr. Harry, please listen to me. If we keep pushing him like this, Storm could face serious issues. He needs... But the weight of silence fell between them like lead. After 30 years of dedicating his life to these horses, Liam felt his eyes sting. As you wish, sir, he murmured at last. I only ask that you consider his well-being. Harry. She approached once the group had drifted away. Don't you think you were too harsh with Liam? He's always taken such good care of the horses. That night, before leaving O'Hara Stables for the last time, Liam made his way to Storm's stall. The horse, recognizing his footsteps, stepped closer to the gate. I'm so sorry, old friend, the trainer whispered, offering a handful of sugar cubes. I wish I could do more for you. Storm took the treat gently, his large, expressive eyes locked onto the man who had cared for him from the moment he arrived. Liam noticed the horse had lost even more weight, his legs bearing the telltale strain of relentless training. He cast one final look at Storm before turning away, carrying only a small bag of belongings and the heavy burden of worry for the animal's fate. As he walked down the dirt road leading away from O'Hara, a certainty settled deep in his bones. Something terrible was about to happen. Race day dawned beneath a sky choked with thick grey clouds, as if nature itself was bracing for what was to come. The city's elite filled the grandstands of the municipal racetrack, their champagne flutes catching the morning light as lively chatter hummed through the air. Harry moved through the crowd of guests with a strained smile, masking his growing unease with generous sips of his drink. Storm is going to show everyone what he's made of, he kept repeating to anyone willing to listen, his voice starting to slur. Across the room, Lily watched in silence, her heart tightening in her chest. Since Liam's departure, Storm had been pushed to his limits under an even harsher training regimen, overseen by a new handler who never dared to question Harry's demands. Out by the stables, Storm was restless. His once bright eyes had dulled, and his coat, which used to gleam under the sunlight, now looked lifeless. The new handler struggled to prepare him for the race, but the horse kept shifting uneasily, as if trying to communicate his discomfort. Mr. Harry, the handler began hesitantly, his voice tense. Maybe we should consider pulling Storm from the race. He doesn't look well. The offhand remark sent a shiver through Lily, who had followed Harry to the stables. Harry, please, she pleaded. Listen to him. Look at Storm. He's in no condition to race. But Storm was placed in the starting gate anyway, his legs visibly trembling. Beside him, other thoroughbreds stood poised for the race, their sleek, muscular bodies a painful contrast to Storm's weakened frame. The starting gun fired, and the gates swung open. Storm bolted forward, his breathing labored and unsteady. The audience watched in tense silence as he struggled to keep up. Then, it happened. Less than 200 meters from the finish line, his body gave out. His legs, overworked and weakened from malnutrition, finally collapsed beneath him. He crashed onto the track, sending up a cloud of dust. Gasps and cries of horror rippled through the stands. The race was immediately halted as the veterinary team rushed onto the track. Harry, watching from the VIP box, felt the world tilt around him, not just from the alcohol but from the sheer humiliation unfolding before his eyes. Whispers and mocking laughter spread like wildfire through the crowd. Richard, who had been toasting beside Harry just moments ago, discreetly stepped away, wanting no part in the disaster. "This horse needs immediate intensive care," the lead veterinarian announced, throwing a hard glance in Harry's direction. "What have you done to him? He's completely exhausted and severely underfed." The rain started then, first in scattered drops, then in a torrential downpour, as if the sky itself wept for Storm's suffering. Harry remained frozen in the VIP box, his face a mask of fury and disgrace as he watched his reputation crumble, along with his dreams of glory. What no one knew was that this moment of defeat was only the beginning. In Harry's mind, a plan was already taking shape, a plan born from wounded pride, drowned in alcohol, and fueled by the sting of humiliation. A plan that would forever alter the fate of everyone involved. The night after the race turned into a nightmare, one that no soul at Elite Stables would ever forget. Harry had locked himself away in his private lounge at the club, surrounded by empty bottles and unanswered messages piling up on his phone. Social media was in an uproar, flooded with videos of Storm's fall, and the comments were merciless. "Shut up!" Harry's slurred voice erupted from inside the room. "I don't want to hear a damn thing about that useless horse. It humiliated me in front of the whole city." By 11 at night, while the storm continued to lash the coast, Harry finally stepped out. His eyes were bloodshot, unfocused, and his steps unsteady. "Where's my phone?" he muttered, rummaging through his pockets. "I need to make a call." Then, with a strange, eerie calm, he said, "Richard, bring your father's yacht to the private dock. Now." When the hesitation on the other end of the line stretched too long, his tone sharpened. "Yes, I know it's raining. I don't care." A slow smirk tugged at his lips, but it never reached his eyes. "Bring the others too. We're throwing a party. A farewell party." His gaze flickered toward the stable. "Storm wants water. I'll give him water," he sneered. "Get him out of here." He pointed at the stallion. "Tie his legs. Make sure he doesn't have any accidents before our little boat ride." The stable hands hesitated, but the unspoken threat in Harry's voice made them obey. Terrified, they dragged Storm out of his stall. The horse, still weak from the race, struggled against them, his eyes wide with fear. Rain pelted down relentlessly, turning the ground into slick mud. At the club's private dock, Richard was already waiting. The yacht, a gleaming symbol of wealth and excess, rocked violently against the pounding waves. Normally, it hosted the most elite parties, a playground for the city's rich and reckless. Now, it was about to become the stage for something much darker. The wind howled, the storm growing fiercer, but the group of drunken young men boarding the yacht didn't seem to care. "Shut up and start the engines," Harry snapped, his eyes glinting with something dangerous. "Or are you scared?" "Harry!" Lily came running down the pier, soaked to the bone. "Don't do this. Think about what your parents would say." What she didn't know was that, at that exact moment, a small fishing boat was making its way back to the harbor. Its owner, a simple man named John, was about to become Storm's only hope. John Silver had never feared rough weather. In 40 years as a fisherman, he had learned that sometimes the best catches came on the stormiest nights. But that night, something felt different. The ocean churned more violently than usual, and a strange unease settled in his chest. "It's time to head back, old friend," he murmured to himself, adjusting the wooden boat that had been his livelihood for decades. The Sea Star wasn't much, but it had fed his family for generations, never once failing him. And then he heard it. Above the roar of the storm and the crashing waves, a sound cut through, one that didn't belong to this chaos, the desperate neigh of a horse. John jerked his head up, at first thinking his ears were playing tricks on him, but then it came again, louder this time. Steering his boat toward the glow of distant lights, John began to hear voices, young, reckless shouts, blended with laughter and blaring music. The noise felt utterly out of place, swallowed by the howling wind and the raging sea. As he drew closer, the sight that unfolded before him made his breath catch. On the yacht's deck, lit by powerful floodlights, a group of drunken young men and women had gathered in a loose circle, their attention fixated on something, or rather, someone. A horse, tied up and terrified, struggled to keep its footing on the slick wooden deck as the vessel swayed violently beneath it. John recognized that voice immediately. Harry Rufus. The name was familiar to anyone who read the society pages. Son of Francisco Rufus, a powerful businessman, Harry was a staple of exclusive parties and elite events. On the yacht, Harry staggered toward the trembling horse, his movements unsteady, his expression twisted into something dark. "Do you have any idea how much you cost me?" he bellowed, jabbing a finger at the terrified animal. "Do you know how much of my reputation you ruined today?" "Harry, man, maybe we should stop," one of his friends muttered, as if suddenly realizing just how far this had gone. "Let's head back. It's been enough." But his words were drowned out by the storm and the relentless music. Near the yacht's edge, Harry positioned himself beside the horse, his face contorted with rage and drunken vengeance. With a violent shove, he forced Storm toward the side of the boat. Still bound and utterly defenseless, the horse lost its footing on the slippery deck. The sound of Storm hitting the water cracked through the night like a gunshot. Vander fought against the waves, his body still tied, making it nearly impossible to swim. The dark water swallowed him, then threw him back up, his every struggle a silent plea for rescue. "Hold on, buddy," John muttered through clenched teeth, torn between the desperate urgency to save the animal and the seething fury at those who had condemned it. "This isn't how this ends." Time felt frozen as John maneuvered his small boat toward the drowning horse. The rain continued its merciless assault, turning visibility into an unrelenting challenge. Storm fought against the waves, his powerful body reduced to panicked, uncoordinated movements by the ropes trapping him. On the yacht, the atmosphere had shifted drastically. The drunken laughter had vanished, replaced by a tense silence, broken only by the raging storm and the horse's anguished cries. Some of the young onlookers stared in shock, as if they had just snapped out of a drunken haze and into the grim reality of what they had allowed to happen. But Harry remained still, a twisted grin stretching across his face as he watched Storm struggle to stay alive. "He wanted to humiliate me," he muttered, his voice laced with a cruelty that made Richard shudder. "Now he's getting exactly what he deserves." John knew there was no time for arguments or futile attempts to awaken the consciences of these reckless young men. Storm needed immediate help. With the precision of a man who had spent years navigating the sea, he maneuvered his boat as close to the horse as possible. Despite the chaos, the animal, displaying an almost human-like intelligence, managed to reach for the lifebuoy with its muzzle. John began pulling the rope steadily, inching Storm closer to the boat. From the yacht, Now drifting several yards away, voices clashed, some shouting to turn back and help, others demanding they leave at once. Harry remained silent, watching the scene unfold as if it were nothing more than a private spectacle. "Come on, old girl," John murmured to his boat, just as he always did in moments of desperation. "Don't fail me now." Storm, exhausted to the brink of collapse, clung to the boy as if understanding it was his only chance at survival. His large, expressive eyes locked onto John, a mixture of fear and trust shining through them, piercing straight into the old fisherman's heart. The yacht disappeared into the darkness, taking Harry and his friends with it. But John knew this couldn't be the end of the story. Someone had to answer for such senseless cruelty. "Helena!" he shouted, recognizing a lone figure standing on the pier. "Helena, call for help!" With the strength of several men, Storm was finally hauled onto solid ground. His body trembled violently, both from the cold and sheer exhaustion, deep rope burns marking his legs. John turned to Helena, who gave a small nod, tears streaming down her face. "It was Harry Rufus," the fisherman declared, his voice steady and resolute. "And I swear, he will answer for this." As the first light of dawn cracked over the horizon, John remained by Storm's side while the horse received urgent care. He knew this night had changed many lives. His own, the horse's, and without a doubt, Harry Rufus's. But deep inside, something told him this was far from over. News spread through town like wildfire. Every local paper ran the same headline: "Heir to the Rufus fortune attempts to drown horse in brutal act of cruelty." Social media exploded with videos recorded by Harry's own friends, capturing his face and actions in undeniable detail. Francisco Rufus was in a state of distress. The scandal had already begun to poison the family name, and with every passing hour, the weight of his son's crime threatened to bring their entire empire crashing down. The dog sat in a weakened state, its body racked with illness. The wounds it bore were not just physical. The deep trauma was evident in its weary eyes. John lowered his head, ever humble. "I only did what any decent person would do," he murmured. Then, gesturing towards Storm, who lay resting in a specially prepared stall, he added, "The real hero is him. I've never seen such a will to survive." At the Rufus estate, Harry was locked in his room, the effects of alcohol having long since worn off. For the first time, he was forced to truly confront the gravity of what he had done. His so-called friends had vanished, their phones now silent, and social media had turned against him with unrelenting fury. A shiver ran down his spine. In all his years of reckless behavior, he had never once seen his father abandon a business trip. And now, for the first time in his life, he felt the terrifying weight of real consequences. At the veterinary clinic, a small crowd had gathered. People arrived with carrots, apples, and other treats for Storm, leaving behind notes and messages of encouragement. Among them was Liam, the old trainer, who had rushed over the moment he heard what had happened. He exhaled a heavy breath as he reached through the stall bars, wrapping his arms around Storm's neck. "What matters is that he's alive," Liam murmured. "And maybe, just maybe, some people will finally learn that money doesn't give them the right to mistreat living beings." "Where is he?" Francisco's voice was steady, but beneath it lay a restrained, simmering fury. Harry sat on the edge of his bed, looking smaller than his 21 years. When he finally lifted his gaze to meet his father's, something inside him shattered. "I don't want to hear your apologies," Francisco said, his voice trembling with barely contained anger. "For years I ignored your reckless behavior, your parties, your absurd spending. I thought I was protecting you, giving you time to grow up. But last night..." He exhaled sharply. "Last night, you crossed a line, and there's no coming back from it." Harry swallowed hard. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. At that moment, back at the clinic, Storm finally drifted into a peaceful sleep under the watchful care of John and Liam. The old fisherman and the seasoned trainer had formed an unspoken alliance, both determined to ensure that the horse would never again suffer at the hands of those who saw him as nothing more than a possession. What neither of them realized was that this day marked the beginning of a profound transformation. Not just for Harry, but for everyone involved. A transformation that would prove that sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what truly matters. The first week after the incident upended Harry's life entirely. Determined to teach his son a lesson, Francisco took drastic action. First, he froze all of Harry's bank accounts, leaving him with nothing but a debit card with a strictly limited daily allowance. Then, he revoked his club memberships, took away his luxury cars, and, most significantly, ordered that he work at the ranch, not as its owner, but as a laborer. "You're starting from zero," Francisco declared over breakfast, as Harry stared in disbelief at the work overalls laid out in front of him. "And when I say zero, I mean absolutely nothing. You're going to clean the stables, haul hay, and learn every single detail of animal care." The words hit like a thunderclap. Liam, the stable hand Harry had once dismissed so unfairly, was now his boss. A deep flush of shame spread across Harry's face as he recalled how he had treated the man. At the veterinary clinic, Storm's recovery continued under the shared care of Dr. Martinez and Liam, who had become a familiar presence. The old fisherman spent hours beside the horse, recounting tales of the sea, his voice steady and soothing as he watched every small sign of progress with quiet satisfaction. "He's responding well to treatment," Dr. Martinez observed, watching as Storm carefully accepted a carrot from Liam's hand. "But the psychological trauma, that's going to take much longer." Harry's first day on the job was a humbling and eye-opening experience. Dressed in plain overalls and rubber boots, he arrived at the stables at 5 a.m. sharp, just as the daily routine began. What followed was a grueling test of both his physical endurance and emotional resilience. Having never done a day of physical labor in his life, Harry soon discovered muscles he hadn't even known existed. His once soft, well-manicured hands were now blistered and raw. Days blurred into weeks, and slowly something began to shift within him. The grueling work, which at first had felt like a punishment too cruel to bear, started to bring an unfamiliar sense of purpose. For the first time, he was learning something real, something that mattered. Liam, watching closely, noticed the transformation. The entitled young man who once barked orders without a second thought was now asking questions, listening, trying to understand. One particularly cold morning, Liam arrived at the stables to find Harry already there, arriving before schedule, carefully preparing the hay for the horses. Harry paused his work for a moment and with a somber look admitted, "You know what's the hardest part? It's not the labor. It's looking into the horse's eyes every day and remembering what I did to Storm. How could I have been so cruel?" Back at the clinic, Storm was also making strides. His physical wounds had almost fully healed, and he was beginning to show signs of trust again. Liam, who by now was considered an honorary member of the team, suggested short walks around the clinic yard to ease Storm's nerves. It was during one of these moments that Francisco appeared. The businessman, who had been quietly following both Storm's recovery and his son's gradual transformation, had come with a proposition. Liam listened closely as Francisco outlined his plan. It was a bold idea, one that had the potential to change not only Storm's fate, but also the lives of Harry, Liam, and everyone else entangled in this story. Liam glanced at Storm, who stood nearby, his intelligent eyes observing everything. Then he looked toward the horizon, where the setting sun cast a golden glow over the fields. A choice had to be made, one that could mark the first real step toward redemption. "I want to turn part of Arras into a rehabilitation center for mistreated horses," Francisco explained, his eyes gleaming with newfound energy. "A place where animals that have endured trauma, like Storm, can heal and find a new home. And I want all of you to help me make it happen." "You want me to—" John started, but Francisco gently cut him off. Dr. Martinez smiled, a quiet nod of approval accompanying his expression. "It's an excellent idea. There are so many horses in need of this kind of care. But what about Harry? How does he fit into all of this?" That same morning, Harry was immersed in his routine at O'Hara Ranch, working with a dedication that took everyone by surprise. He was in the middle of feeding the horses when Lily approached, her expression unusually serious. A cold wave tightened in Harry's stomach. Despite all the changes over the past few weeks, he still felt uneasy in his father's presence. But when he stepped into the study, he was met with an even greater surprise. Not only Francisco was there, but also John, Liam, and Dr. Martinez. In the moments that followed, Harry listened in silence as his father laid out the vision for the rehabilitation center. His heart pounded harder with every word, the sheer scale of the idea sinking in. A lump formed in his throat and he could feel the sting of tears welling up, but he made no effort to hide them. "I want to try," he said, his voice steady, honest. "I need to try." "That's exactly why," Liam added, his tone firm yet encouraging. "Your redemption starts here. If you can regain Storm's trust, you'll prove that you've truly changed." Harry turned toward the window, gazing out at the horses grazing in the pasture. He thought about how he used to see them, nothing more than status symbols, possessions to display his wealth. But now, after weeks of caring for them, he was beginning to understand their nobility, their sensitivity, their ability to forgive. John offered a knowing smile, one that carried a quiet wisdom, a kindness that seemed limitless. "Then it starts tomorrow. Storm will be transferred here to O'Hara, and you will be the one to welcome him. Not as his owner, but as someone willing to learn, to be better." As Harry stepped out of the study, something unfamiliar stirred in his chest. It was no longer the crushing weight of guilt that had shadowed him these past few weeks. Instead, it was something lighter, something fragile, yet undeniable. Hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to change, to grow, to become something more. At the veterinary clinic, Storm rested in his stall, unaware of the decisions that would soon shape his future. Yet, as if sensing something significant was on the horizon, his eyes gleamed with a quiet, renewed energy. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but it would also offer the chance for a new beginning, for both of them. The morning of Storm's transfer arrived crisp and clear, the early light casting golden streaks across the sky. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves in a slow, rhythmic dance. Harry had arrived at O'Hara before dawn, his heart pounding in his chest. He spent hours preparing a special stall, meticulously following Liam's instructions to make the space as warm and welcoming as possible. Terrified, Harry admitted as he ran a trembling hand through his hair. "What if he recognizes me? What if he panics, just from seeing me?" John was the first to step down, followed closely by Dr. Martinez. Liam was already on site, overseeing the final preparations. Storm was carefully led out of the trailer, his steps still a little hesitant, but far steadier than they had been in the past few weeks. The horse took in his new surroundings with wary curiosity, his ears flicking in every direction, attuned to even the faintest sound. Then his gaze landed on Harry, and he froze. Time stretched, each second unbearably long. Harry clenched his fists, fighting the trembling in his hands. Storm remained motionless, his eyes locked onto him, not with fear, but with something deeper, an intense, searching curiosity. "This is incredible," Dr. Martinez murmured in awe. He's holding himself back, hesitating to approach. Then something happened that no one had expected. With slow, deliberate steps, Storm moved forward until he was less than a yard away from Harry. Lowering his majestic head, the horse let out a soft breath, ruffling Harry's hair. The boy stood frozen, barely daring to breathe. Storm remained close, occasionally brushing against him with his muzzle, as if reacquainting himself with Harry's scent, his presence. Harry felt it, a quiet but unshakable resolve, unlike anything he had ever known before. "I'll do whatever it takes." "It's as if he knows," Lily remarked one afternoon, watching Storm gently take a carrot from Harry's hand. "Like he understands you're not the same person anymore." From a distance, Francisco observed his son with silent contemplation. It wasn't just Harry's dedication to the work or his care for Storm. It was something deeper, a transformation of character that had been long overdue. John smiled, his eyes gleaming with wisdom. "Yes, I think they're both ready. Storm to help other horses. And Harry—" He paused, looking at the young man with quiet certainty. "Harry is ready to help people. I still can't believe all of this started with an act of cruelty," Lily said later that evening as she helped arrange the chairs for the opening ceremony. "It's like the universe took something terrible and turned it into something extraordinary." "You deserve this more than anyone," John said warmly, walking toward her with Storm at his side. The horse, now fully recovered, moved with his signature grace. But there was something different about him now, a quiet serenity, the kind that only time and true compassion could bring. Harry hesitated, his gaze sweeping over the gathered crowd. He saw faces that once regarded him with nothing but contempt, people who had every reason to doubt him. Taking a deep breath, he began. "A few months ago, I was a different person. Someone who believed money and status were everything. Someone who saw animals as possessions, as symbols of power. It took making the worst mistake of my life to finally understand the true worth of things," Harry continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I nearly lost my humanity before I could truly find it again. And I owe that to so many people. To my father, who had the courage to hold me accountable and guide me. To Lily, who never gave up on me. To Liam, who taught me what it truly means to care. And most of all, to John, a simple man who risked his life to save Storm. And without knowing it, ended up saving me too." Silent tears streamed down Lily's face as Francisco pressed his lips together, struggling to hold back his emotions. John, ever humble, simply smiled, his hand resting gently on Storm's chest. "This place isn't just a sanctuary for injured horses," Harry continued, his voice steady with conviction. "It's a place of transformation. Every animal that comes here will have the same chance Storm had, to learn to trust again, to heal, to start over. And every person who works here will have the same opportunity I had, to grow, to change, to become someone better." As Harry finished speaking, the air hung heavy with emotion before being shattered by the sound of heartfelt applause. Storm, as if sensing the significance of the moment, exhaled softly and relaxed, making everyone smile. "Her name is Estrella," Liam read from the rescue report, then glanced at John with a knowing look. "Fitting, isn't it? Just like your boat." "Incredible," murmured Dr. Martinez, who had been silently observing everything. "It's as if Storm understands exactly what's happening, like he wants to show that there's hope." John placed a firm yet gentle hand on Harry's shoulder and said, "You know what the most remarkable thing about all this is? Storm isn't just a survivor anymore. He's become a healer." "Yes," John continued, his eyes gleaming with the wisdom of years. "What a beautiful new beginning this is." On a particularly hectic morning, Lily rushed into Harry's office where he was poring over reports on the horse's progress. "Harry, you need to see this," she gasped, breathless. "It's about Richard." On the screen, a live news broadcast showed Richard being led away in handcuffs by the police. The headline was unmistakable: "Santos heir arrested for running illegal horse races." Harry sank heavily into his chair, the weight of old memories pressing down on him. That could have been him. In fact, that nearly was him. He looked at Joan, then Liam, and finally at Lily. He didn't need to say a word. They all knew what had to be done. Joan, however, kept his gaze fixed on Harry. "You know what this means, don't you?" the old fisherman asked. "You'll have to face your past again." The rescue mission was organized at record speed. Within 3 hours, a convoy of specially equipped trailers was en route to Richard's property. Despite everyone's concerns, Harry insisted on going along. What they found was devastating. The horses were in desperate condition. Many showed clear signs of doping, their injuries left untreated and festering. Seeing them like that forced Harry to confront the cruelty he himself had once been part of. But now he saw it through completely different eyes. The rescue operation stretched throughout the entire day. Each horse needed to be assessed, stabilized, and prepared for transport. Harry worked tirelessly, using every bit of knowledge he had gained over the past months. "He knows," John remarked, watching the behavior of a particularly skittish horse. "He knows exactly what they're going through." "Hey there, buddy," Harry whispered as he cautiously approached the terrified animal. "I know you have no reason to trust humans right now. Honestly, I wouldn't either. But I promise you, this time, it's going to be different." "Isn't it incredible?" Francisco's voice cut through the quiet, his presence unnoticed until now. "How life gives us the chance to make things right." That night, as the veterinarians worked tirelessly to stabilize the newest arrivals, Harry moved from stall to stall, ensuring every animal had fresh water and clean hay. Storm followed at a distance, a silent guardian of Harry's path to redemption. A year had passed since the night Storm had nearly lost his life to the sea. What had started as a desperate attempt at redemption had now become something much greater. The Equine Recovery Center was now a nationally recognized sanctuary, a leading facility for treating and rehabilitating traumatized horses. More than 50 animals had come through its gates, each carrying their own story of survival. On a particularly significant morning, Harry sat at his desk, far removed from the luxurious offices he once frequented. The walls were lined with photographs of rescued horses, each image a testament to transformation. On his desk, beside his computer, rested an old silk tie, the same one he had worn on the day of the race, a constant reminder of the man he used to be. To his surprise, Liam entered the office accompanied by an elderly woman whose eyes shimmered with emotion. "This is Mrs. Carmen," Liam introduced. "She was the original owner of Estrella, our very first rescue." Harry immediately rose to greet her, but before he could extend his hand, she pulled him into a tight embrace. "My dear boy," she said, her voice trembling. "I have no words to thank you for what you've done for Estrella. After my husband passed, I could no longer keep the ranch, and she suffered so much." Out in the special pasture, Estrella grazed peacefully beside Storm. Once frail and fearful, the mare now stood strong, her coat gleaming, her eyes full of life. At the sight of Mrs. Carmen, her ears pricked forward, and she trotted gracefully toward the fence. "She's been a great teacher to our other horses," Harry explained, "especially the older ones we've rescued. Alongside Storm, she helps the newcomers adjust." At that moment, John approached, carrying some training equipment. "Mrs. Carmen, it's a pleasure to meet you," he said warmly. "Harry, I think it's time we show her what Estrella has been doing with the girls." "I never imagined," Mrs. Carmen murmured, watching as John prepared Estrella for a demonstration. "When I was forced to sell the ranch, I thought I was sentencing her to a sad fate. But look at her now. She's found an even greater purpose." Francisco, who had arrived quietly, stepped forward to join the group. "Harry," he called, "tell Mrs. Carmen about the new project." "I'm going to share what I've learned about the emotional side of this work," John said, his ever-humble smile in place. Yet, deep down, he still believed the horses had taught him far more than he could ever teach them. Harry exchanged a meaningful glance with his father before responding, "I'll be coordinating the awareness program, traveling across the country, telling our story, mine and Storm's, and helping to prevent other horses from suffering the way he did." "The Storm and the others are recovering well," Liam replied. "Some are even ready for adoption. Of course, we've carefully selected families for them." Mrs. Carmen, watching Storm and Estrella stand side by side, murmured, "You know, they say God writes straight with crooked lines." Looking at all of this, all the kindness that had risen from so much hardship, I can't help but believe that's true. It was the second anniversary of the Storm Equine Recovery Center, and the place had been transformed for the occasion. Bright banners fluttered in the gentle morning breeze, and the scent of fresh hay filled the air. Dozens of people moved between the stables and training areas, many of them families who had adopted rehabilitated horses from the center. At 23, Harry was almost unrecognizable from the arrogant young man he once was. His hands, once soft and untouched by labor, now bore the rough calluses of honest work. And in his eyes, there was a quiet wisdom, the kind that only true transformation could bring. John, who had arrived with his family, now an integral part of the center's team, flashed his familiar, warm smile. "Sometimes we have to hit rock bottom before we can find the strength to climb back up." "Hey, buddy," Harry whispered, wrapping his arms around the horse's neck. "I had to see you before we started. You know this is all because of you, right?" Father and son walked together toward the main gathering area, where a small crowd had already formed. Among them were veterinarians, trainers, adoptive families, and, to the surprise of many, some of Harry's old friends. But they hadn't come to mock him. They had come to learn. Liam stepped onto the small stage first to share the center's progress. Over 200 horses rescued, 80 adoptive families registered, 30 students trained in our specialized equine care program, he announced. Every number represents a life transformed, a story of redemption. "I want you to see something," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Something Storm taught me, something that changed my life forever. Look at them," Harry's voice rang out. Every one of these horses came here broken, terrified, with no faith left in people, just like I was, broken, scared, and full of doubt. But Storm, his voice wavered for a moment. "Storm showed me there is always room for forgiveness, for second chances, for love. "You know what's truly beautiful?" the old fisherman asked. "It's that now you have become a beacon of hope for others." "I wonder sometimes," Harry said softly, watching Storm gently interact with a group of young girls at the celebration, "whether he truly lost me or simply realized he needed a chance to become a better man. I may never know." The celebration carried on throughout the day, filled with ecotherapy demonstrations, heartfelt performances by students from the animal care program, and moving stories of recovery. But the most touching moment came when Storm, on his own accord, approached a newly arrived horse that stood trembling in the corner, wide-eyed with fear. Harry felt her heart swell with gratitude, knowing that this was the very essence of their work. And this is what we'll keep doing, isn't it? One day at a time, one horse at a time, one person at a time. Wow, what a journey, right? I just want to take a moment to say, this story isn't real, but the lessons it carries, very real. At its core, this is a story about redemption, about learning that wealth and status mean nothing if you lack empathy and kindness. Harry started off as someone who believed money could buy everything: respect, power, even love. But through his downfall, through losing everything, he discovered something far greater: the value of compassion, responsibility, and second chances. And let's not forget Storm. He's not just a horse in this story. He represents resilience, survival, and ultimately, the power of forgiveness. This story also sheds light on the cruelty that often happens behind closed doors in the world of competitive sports, not just with horses, but with all animals. It's a harsh reminder that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for the innocent lives that depend on us. So, what do you guys think? Did this story hit you the way it hit me? What was the most powerful moment for you? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And hey, if this story made you think differently about second chances, redemption, or even just the way we treat animals, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Until next time, take care, be kind, and remember, everyone deserves a chance to be better.